when we talk about SIP gateway, the reason comes up, at least when I talk to partners, is they're going into situations where they're doing migrations, right? Typically migrations from legacy PBX systems or from Skype for Business where there's an SBC in place. And then there's devices that are tied to that SBC, right? So we're talking about things like analog phones. We're talking about things like paging, strobe lights, door openers, things of that nature, right? Even faxing, which we won't get into because it doesn't really apply to SIP gateway, but there's always some equipment that's in place that when you're talking to your partners, those things come up and they don't really translate to Teams, right? We don't support a lot of those types of devices that are legacy devices. So SIP gateway is kind of coming in to fill that gap, right? Why do we want SIP gateway? We obviously want customers to be able to, like I just said, fill the gap, maybe even reuse some of the devices that they have in place so that they don't have to repurchase everything, right? Make sure that they are able to still have some of those features in place, because in some instances you can replace maybe analog devices or things of that nature. I've seen people be a little creative with paging and how they do that to get rid of their old paging equipment. But in general, we want them to be able to keep that. We want it to be, simple, because most of those devices are a lot more simple, right, than our Teams devices and meeting rooms and everything else. And also, again, like we said, we want them to reuse it. So if cost is a consideration, we want to make sure that we limit the expense in some cases, right, to make sure that adoption is possible, to that make sure you guys can go forward with the deployment. Even if they have to purchase devices, those devices are typically cheaper than what you would spend on a traditional Teams device, right? And obviously we have to compete. So we want that parity with third-party systems. So we're trying to again fill that gap, make sure we can compete to some degree. One of the nice things about utilizing SIP gateway with these devices is you get some added security with those devices as they work with Teams. They're future ready, right? So you can continue utilizing them. You can use them for your meetings. You can, in the future, you'll be able to use them for additional things like location-based routing or media optimization, etc. Right? Scott, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you pretty much covered that part.
All right, perfect. So what is SIP gateway, right? We're not going to get super technical. All this is really on the back end for Microsoft. So there's no device you guys have to manage, right? So we don't need to get extremely deep into this type of conversation, but it's basically a device that enables that compatibility with the third-party devices, like I was just mentioning, right? And it allows you guys to leverage the Teams functionality and the features, core features, with those devices. So from a Teams perspective, those devices will simply look like an additional Teams endpoint, right? And you'll be able to manage those devices to some degree as well directly from the Teams admin center. So you'll be able to onboard and offboard those devices, sign in, utilizing Azure Active Directory, which gives you some benefits. And then there's a pairing technique also for some devices that you're going to need in order to enroll them in the Teams admin center. That basic telephony, so what that really covers is incoming and outgoing calls, right, with your typical features like hold, transfer, resume. You'll have call forwarding, dial in and out of meetings, presence for in-call, right? DND, I think, is in the works if it's not available on some of them already. Dynamic E911, so we just had that, very important conversation. Thank you, Indranil. These devices are going to be able to, some of the devices, I should say, are going to be able to support dynamic E911. And then you have voicemail and MWI, so you have your message waiting indicator that's going to be available in that basic telephony, essentially, for these devices. So you get the core functionality. There's some additional things that you have on a full-fledged Teams device that is not going to be available in these, but for the most part, this will do everything you need from a phone perspective. If you're looking at it strictly as just a phone, right, which will fill the gap in a lot of instances, which is great. I don't know if this is updated. I think this is a few months old, so this might be. If you look in our docs, you'll actually be able to see the updated list. But this is just to show you some of the devices that are available. So we have some Cisco, Yearling, Poly audio codes, and then on the roadmap, DECT is in the works. The GA might be out if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember if they pushed that a few months, but I got that coming. ATA as well is planned. So that'll be Cisco Poly audio codes, and then IP phones we're talking as well. Hopefully.
So, yeah, so the ATA also includes generic SIP join devices like paging adapters and things like that. So if you think of your tannoy or your paging devices that are SIP capable or analog through a gateway, well, those will start being supported as well, which has been a huge ask, which has been pretty cool to see. So
yeah, that's one of the ones they run into probably the most. Just a quick little comparison, right, from your third-party IP gateways and Teams phone, right? As you can see, there's pretty much parity there. We have some additional features that are available. Obviously, when we're talking about Teams, we want to manage devices in the Teams admin center, so that's one of the things that's available. Right now, that's limited. I know there's some features that they're working on bringing as well, but it is something that differentiates it. And then the other thing is the call forwarding, like I mentioned. I know DECT, it's grayed out right now, but like I said, they're working on that. That should be out soon. We just had a really neat presentation on some Poly DECT devices that are available, which are really great. Those will be, I think, included. So that's going to be really cool. And then enhanced device network status reporting. So right now, I think there is network device status, but I'm not exactly sure what enhanced means. There's probably some additional features there. So like I said, DECT, these are some of the things that are coming soon. Some of these are already out. So DECT preview happened. The GA, I believe, is going on with some of those devices. Dynamic E911, like I said, and that's supported on some of the devices. So again, look at the documentation online to see which ones are not. All that's spelled out pretty clearly there. Admin experience of removing devices. So that's also something that was a little bit of a pain point, right? If you enrolled a device and then it was no longer used, it would just kind of stick there. So we can actually go in and remove devices, and the auto cleanup of still devices, which ties into that as well. So that I think they're also implementing. And then some of these other features like GCC is something I got asked about just the other day, coming sometime, the second half of this year. So there's only 3.5 months left. DND from the SIP device, call park, be able to use them with your auto attendants and call queues. So that could come in very handy. And then directory search is a big one, right? Because we use that in Teams. Obviously, you can just type a name and call somebody. So some of that functionality in this devices is going to be very welcome. And like I kind of touched on originally, the location-based routing and local media optimization as well. And I'm not sure. That should. I would assume that applies to all the devices, right? So the onboarding and provisioning process for these devices, again, some of this is going to help maybe when you're troubleshooting, but like we mentioned, the infrastructure is all Microsoft backend, so there's not too much you guys can manage from that perspective. Obviously, your network, firewalls, things of that nature, is something going to be within your control. But the device edge, essentially, that SBC provides the environment for the devices and enrolls them essentially into the Teams admin center, so they show up as a endpoint. So the device manager validates that the devices are compatible, pushes firmware, and then you have I just lost my place. After the sign-in, like I said, so devices, the config is populated with the sign-in accounts attribute. So obviously these devices are going to use a user, right? Most of the time, they're going to be user accounts, which are licensed. You're going to have to provide a PSTN phone number, whether that's a calling plan or direct routing or operator connect. So the user account attributes push to the device as it registers with the SBC, and then it registers to team after that on behalf of the device. All right, when we're talking about the dynamic provisioning, so the device hub essentially pulls every hour for policies and user settings through SIP notify messages. and it forces that config sync if there's any changes to the devices essentially at that point. And like we mentioned, that feature of offboarding devices. So we'll give you the ability to remove the devices that you're no longer using directly from the Teams Admin Center, and that's in progress. Again, so we talked about that being released. I think it said June. I don't know if Scott, if you've checked if that's. I know you have some registered in your tenant, but if that's an option that's available or not at this point.
No,
I
I
would
haven't
assume
checked.
so.
Sorry.
Okay. For sign in, the users may sign in or out from the devices, right? So these are personal devices. We're talking about the phones generally. Or you can use remote sign in or sign out from the Teams Admin Center from an admin perspective on some of the shared devices. So that could be different types of phones, or we're talking about, like the paging, the door openers, things that don't have like a readily available or easy UI, right, locally. For the signing process, right, you have your phones that fetch the pairing code with the web URL that's displayed on the device or the Teams Admin Center, because you can use both methods. It enables the users to pair and sign in with your corporate credentials, like we said. So it utilizes Azure Active Directory so that you can use your authentication policies like MFA and everything else that you might have in place. So that's key. That's one of the features that, I mentioned, security being brought to these types of devices. That's one of those, key points that we want to emphasize when we're talking about this, because it's something that's not readily available on the devices or different PBXs in some instances, right? So after the sign in, based on the policies, right, it checks that the user is authorized, makes sure that it pushes the policy, fits all the prerequisites, and then it pairs the device, pulls the config and the user attributes, and it registers with Teams. And like we mentioned, they can sign in and out of the devices just like any other Teams endpoint. So nothing really too crazy. It's just the flow really that the devices take to register and authenticate is a little different because they're different types of devices. So they have to go through the SIP gateway backend to get to Teams, essentially. That's the point of those. And then some of the devices, like I said, DECT is coming. I think the preview is done. I don't know if GA is available yet. I think it should be. I don't have a DECT device to test. I wish I did. Maybe they'll send me one of those polys that they were showing us the other day. But these DECT devices, they're really nice. They work really well in certain settings like hospitals or manufacturing, warehouses, right? Because you can have one base with a bunch of, I think some of the bases that I saw support like 10 or 20 devices. So you can have, one base that services multiple devices. And you can utilize those devices. They're, portable devices. It's nice because we've had instances of people telling us where, hey, you know what? If I'm walking around the warehouse or if I'm in a retail floor or something like that, and I need to use Teams, I have to open my phone, find the app, get in Teams, make the call or send the message or whatever it is they need to do. With these devices, you just press a button, make a call. It's a Teams call right away. So there's some benefits to these, especially for mobile users and people that are on the floor, or like I said, hospitals, warehouses, healthcare. It just speeds things up and makes things simple. There's no need for having an app on a device to utilize Teams. So it makes that a nice seamless process for the users. And like I said, so we're already doing a POC. SpectraLink and ASCOM were two of the ones that were doing it. Poly is another one that we're working with. So some of these devices will be available. Again, if you look at the docs in Microsoft.com, you'll be able to see which devices will be supported and then make a decision on what you want to use based on that. Analog ATA. So Scott just mentioned some of this, right? So this is most of what I talk to my partners about is tied to ATAs, right? So we mentioned paging, strobe lights. Again, faxing doesn't really tie into here, but analog phones. When you're in an environment where they have a lot of this infrastructure in place, it's usually through ATAs that then talk to an SBC, right? And if you're using direct routing, you can kind of keep that stuff in place. Maybe there's just a little bit of logic that you change on the SBC for routing purposes to and from those devices. So you can have some integration with Teams, but the whole point of the SIP gateway is to replace the ATA for the most part, right? So we'll be able to register some of these devices that would utilize an ATA and even the ATAs directly into SIP gateway. I think so. Scott, would paging fall into the ATA category for
because
registration?
it'll be a direct SIP join. It'll be a device that that can register. The problem with analog lines is you're going to need that ATA to register to create the analog side. So you think of like your audio codes. What are they?
MPs.
The MP 112, 114, 128s. Those will actually register through the GUI for those analog lines to be supported. So the ATAs will stay in place, but you'll remove the need to have, say, direct routing in your environment if that's all you had it in there for, was to support your analog devices. So we'll be able to do those right to Teams. And what that does is it reduces the complexity of having to manage both an SBC with routes in it, and the devices themselves, because they'll be given phone numbers. You'll make them common. There'll be common area phone basically that will make it easier for you to directly call in your client, rather than having like a routing rule that sends it to a particular SBC that's only registering ATAs. So we're very excited about that, and it's going to be a wonderful thing, especially when it comes to paging.
Right.
You'll be able to, to integrate your existing analog paging environment in a warehouse or manufacturing facility or something like that, and that makes everybody's lives easier because now they don't have to come up with kludgy ways of doing things.
Yeah, definitely. And two things on that for like the analog devices being common area phones, that you can still apply policies to restrict dialing, obviously, make sure they can't make or receive calls you don't want them to do. And as far as paging, some of these paging vendors out there have devices that you can daisy chain, right? So it'll not only simplify the configuration from a Teams perspective, but also from your infrastructure perspective, because you can eliminate a lot of cable drops or cabling and amplifiers, et cetera. So there's a lot here that we could have a conversation on. Typically, like I said, this is where most of my conversations fall with partners, because they're trying to figure out how to move this type of infrastructure with Teams. So this is a big one for me, at least. This is going to be key. I think once this is in place, like Scott said, you can get rid of that SBC, register things directly with the SIP gateway, and then keep the rest, keep the ATA and the devices plugged into that, right? Which is going to make life for everybody easier. And like I said, they're in progress to integrate the ATA with the SIP gateway. I don't think there's besides second half of this year, I don't know that there's any clear date set yet for ATA for that, but it's coming. I mentioned door phones, door openers, those, depending on what kind of device you have, right? Because we can have the SIP devices, or you can have, your legacy analog type devices. I know there's some vendors out there that have SIP ones, so those would most likely be easier to integrate and potentially come sooner than the rest, if the rest even come. But I know, like it says here, there's some investigation validation that needs to happen with those devices, and I think that applies to the legacy analog ones. Maybe not so much on the SIP ones, because those could, in theory, register a lot easier with the SIP gateway, so the lift might be a lot less. And again, if you have ATAs, maybe you can keep those legacy ones just fine once that ATA is supported in SIP gateway. Pagers, this ties again to ATAs, and pagers can be the speakers, it could be your strobe lights, right? These, again, they fall within the ATA category, but this is the big one. Once you have these available and supported, I think some of these deployments at schools and hospitals, where they're heavily utilized, maybe warehouses and manufacturing, can be less of a blocker in some instances, because that's usually why I'm having these conversations. But again, these are some of these devices, not all, because there's SIP-based ones as well. Could be a little more challenging to configure and make sure that they work directly with SIP gateway, to integrate into the SIP gateway. Okay. Management. So like I said, one of the benefits of having SIP gateway and utilizing your devices with Teams is that you can manage the devices in the TAC right? So after the device signs in, basically they are enrolled in the TAC, and you can see the devices within the Teams Admin Center. There's a specific tab now for those devices. I think Scott touched on that when he did his presentation for SIP devices. So you'll be able to see them in there. And like we said, we can sign in or out. And I think right now you're limited to turning them on or off and then removing them, if I'm not mistaken. So there's more features coming down the road for that. And for common area phone devices, it's a little different. So in order to enroll them, you have to leverage the pairing method, right? So when you go into Teams Admin Center, you would essentially push the device up to Teams, and I think it uses a CSV file with a MAC address. So the hardware ID that we use for these is a MAC address. You put it in there, push it to Teams, it loads the device, gives you a code. Then you basically give that code to your engineer, your tech who's out there actually, connecting these devices. Make sure that they type in *55* plus the code, and then it'll enroll the device and make sure that they are available in the Teams Admin Center. After which point, you're able to remotely sign into the devices, right? So using that same method that you would for your SIP devices, using the URL, you're going to be able to do that now with the common area devices as well. So some nice features coming down the road for management. Like I said, inventory listings available. You can issue some commands to restart, remotely sign in, and then remove them, I think, is coming down the road, as well as some config management, which is available now on regular Teams devices. Then if you use your OEM tools and then firmware updates, which is also available on regular Team devices, remote provisioning of restricted devices, such like we said, not phones necessarily, but some of the door openers that don't have interface like the phones might, some of the door ringers, pagers, and certain analog devices that fall into that category. So it would simplify management configuring of all those devices, and also signing in and out of some of those restricted devices as well. So further, just final touches here, we're going to go over a little bit of some of the flows for calling, for example, right? So you'd have your user make a call from that SIP device. It's going to go to the gateway within the backend of SIP gateway, go out the core to Team services, which is how it's connected, and then you see the call go to the Teams user, and that's how the integration would work. And obviously, the call in the other direction would just simply be reversed. But that's the infrastructure. Those light purple boxes is essentially what the SIP gateway entails, and that's how we're tying into Teams, making life simple for everybody. So for authentication, you can kind of see the whole process here. I won't get too much into the detail, but you'll see how it goes from the device. It's going to pull the URL and the pairing code. It's going to get the web page on the computer, so you can redirect to Active Directory authentication. Send that over to the hub to send it to the backend. Get your pairing code input from the web page, and then once all that is completed and you have the results, going to pull the config, send it back to the device, and you'll be authenticated, right? So just a high-level process of that authentication flow. Again, all of that's happening on the back end. It's not anything you guys need to necessarily worry about, except for maybe from the device to the cloud, right? So like we said, potentially, something blocking ports or that traffic locally that you have to worry about in terms of troubleshooting. Registration, same kind of process, right? You push the register message, goes to the SIP gateway. It's then sent over to the cloud, and you get back your registration update and your config back from the cloud to the device. Nothing too complicated there. For calling, again, so it's the same sort of call flow. This just adds a little extra detail into what those hops are, right? Essentially, it's going from the SIP gateway to a PSTN proxy, which then goes to the main core gateway that ties to Teams, and then goes out to Teams. And again, the call in the opposite direction is simply reversed. Nothing overly complicated here either. I think lastly is just the administration piece, right? So like we said, there's already some features available, but the way that it works is, the tenant admin goes to to the Microsoft backend, Teams Admin Center essentially, which then sends it over to the SIP Gateway admin API through the SIP Gateway admin API to the SIP Gateway, which then you're able to restart the device, remote sign in, do all of that fun stuff. And that's basically it.